In the name of the one holy triune God, amen. Thank you all for being here. So back to the story of the Good Samaritan. One thing I have learned from sacred ground, and one thing that I find in the story of the Good Samaritan, is that it is Jesus that lifts us up out of the gutter. It is Jesus who gives us complete love, and that love frees us to be whole. That love allows us to be a restored people. Jesus comes to us because we're broken. We are shattered by our racist history, and yet we are struggling to do something to be the very humans that God calls us to be. We just heard Julie read the story of the Good Samaritan. And as you heard, there's a Jewish man, and he's going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. The pathway is very steep. And as he nears Jericho, the dry land gives way to a barren earth that is entirely stripped of any plants. It is dead, it is desolate. Some robbers come along and they capture him and they strip him of everything. They strip him naked. He is as if newborn and yet beaten and thrown into a ditch. He has lost his identity. He has lost everything about him, about himself. A priest comes along and a priest notes him and he says, well, I can't touch a dead man. This is what we assume, because that would make me dirty. That would make me religiously dirty. So he skirts over and he goes the other way, or he passes by. A Levite, and a Levite is also part of a religious family, comes by and does the same. He looks at him and says, I don't want to be soiled by this person. And he goes on his way. A third man comes along, and this fellow is a Samaritan, which means that this is not his hometown. He's very far from home. He is a stranger in this area. And he stops. And with the absolute utmost care, he cleans the man's wounds with the antiseptic of wine, and he carries him to the inn. He takes his own money and he pays for this man's restoration. And then he says, I'm going to come back, whatever this person needs to make him whole again, to make him complete, I will do that for him. So what he's doing is he's taking a man who is entirely broken, and he's saying, you are my child. You may be a stranger, but you are my child to me. He treats him as I remember treating my own children when they fell down and they banged themselves up. All I wanted to do was to fix their bodies, but to fix them, to make them whole. And this is what the Good Samaritan does. He wants to make this broken man who is stripped of his identity, who's lost everything, and to make him whole. So traditionally, the story of the Good Samaritan is read to exhort us not only to love our neighbor, but to envision strangers as our neighbor. So at the very beginning, we heard the lawyer ask, who is our neighbor? And he's kind of being a smart aleck, like, okay, good for you, Jesus. You're telling us this story, but I'm going to kind of prick your bubble and, well, tell me who my neighbor is. So then Jesus tells us our story. And the idea that we should come away from this is that our neighbors are the people who don't look like us. They're the ones who don't love the same way we do. They're even the ones who don't vote the same way we do. And within our own context here, our neighbors are not only the people in the wards, the wealthier wards right around St. Margaret's, they're the ones across the city where children are shot randomly in playgrounds and where people have no heat in the winter. Those are our neighbors, and those are the people that we are taught as Good Samaritans that we should be helping. So we sort of identified ourselves as wanting to be Good Samaritans because we realize that we're more fortunate than these desperately poor people. We're more fortunate than the war refugees that are coming in, some to America, some to other parts of the world. And we're certainly more fortunate than the homeless people living in tents on DC cities, or at least we think we are. We think we're more fortunate than they are. And you may volunteer at Charlie's Place, or you may give money to relocate Afghan refugees, and you seek, but what you seek, however, is impossible. You seek to be the Good Samaritan, and I do not believe that that is actually what Jesus is calling us to do, to be. Jesus is telling us that we are not the helpers, but we are the ones who are in desperate need of salvation. We ourselves are the man in the ditch. Jesus is telling us that we have been broken by our actions as Americans, by our long history of racism, by all the things we are done. We are the ones that have been beaten to a pulp and thrown into a ditch. And Jesus is telling us that we are no different from the people that we seek to help, because they are broken also. What we share with them is our complete brokenness. We are all in the ditch together. And if there is one thing that Sacred Ground has taught me, it's that I am horribly fallible and broken. To put it in the words of our church, I have realized that I am a sinner and probably more racist than I really want to believe. And that I need God's help to fix me of my brokenness. And every one of us is lying in a ditch, searching for that truth, searching for that salvation. I believe that's what that's what Jesus is leading us to see. And if we wish to make a difference in the world of racial justice, we must first acknowledge that brokenness, that we are people in a ditch. And when we acknowledge the emptiness and places of shame inside us, it is then that we can ask to be healed. And God offers his entire, complete, wondrous love, just as Jesus does, as we see in the story of the Good Samaritan. God's salve of forgiveness heals the wounds of all people without discrimination, in order that we all might begin to heal each other. We are left to ask ourselves, who else is in the ditch with me? How might that person be offering themselves to me? And how might I be open and honest with them? How might we be healed together? That, I believe, is the answer to the lawyer's question of who is my neighbor. My neighbor is the person who is in the ditch with me. And I am looking into her face, and when I look into her face, I see my own face. God heals us as one body, whole and complete in each other. Amen.